everybody. Good morning or good afternoon, and just want to say welcome to your Wasted Green, your Waste Edible Greens, a webinar series by Living Farms, powered by the Hive Explorer. So, firstly, to everybody here, I hope you can all hear me. If you have any trouble hearing or if it's not clear, please let me know right now before we begin. All right, great. So I see that you guys can hear me properly. So in about a minute, we'll get started with the webinar. Today's topic is actually topic 11 or lesson 11 in our curriculum. So it's called Sustainable Designs and a Future Foods Restaurant Concept. So to many of you that are new or to my old listeners, this webinar is not too focused on the Hive Explorer, but don't worry about that. We know that many of you have recently received your Hive Explorer, so we'll be starting a new series hopefully sometime very soon to guide you through a little more about the Hive Explorer itself, the product, maintenance, and anything you might be interested in. So do feel free to let us know along the way what you want to hear about and what you want to talk to us about because that will be coming soon. But just for today, hi again. I'm Sovina and I'm the webinar instructor and marketing associate at Living Farms. And today it's going to be a little less of a demonstration or experiment. We're going to be talking a little more and we'll try to keep it short and exciting and interesting. We're going to look at waste reduction through a case study and how to reduce waste successfully in a local community. And also for those teachers out there, we're looking a little bit at how to develop a project pitch. And we previously in our sixth webinar looked at future foods as a restaurant concept. So we'll be talking a little bit about that as well. But yes, there's a little greater focus on the curriculum and on how to teach and how to deliver this webinar. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started. So here, like I said, we're looking at lesson 11, designing the future foods restaurant concept. And you'll be learning about a case study from a city called Surabaya in Indonesia and how they actually developed a waste reduction program. And they're a small local community. So this is a very interesting concept. And moving on here, we're going to look at how can we make artificial systems more sustainable. So these are all big, intimidating concepts, and you'll probably be like, okay, what is an artificial system though? Well, bringing us back to lesson 2, we looked at general systems, okay? So a general system contains actually 3 main working parts, as you can see here, your input, your process, and your output. So input, simple enough, it's actually what goes into a system. Your process is what changes that input, and then your output is what comes out of this. So this is generally what a system is composed of, but why this becomes complicated is because systems can actually interact with each other, making them more complex. A simple example of a system that you have in your body is just your breathing and your respiratory system, because your input would be the oxygen, your process is the gas exchange in your lungs, and your output is you exhaling that carbon dioxide. So systems are something that we don't just talk about in a simple linear form like this. They are complex, they can be circular, and systems are something that you'll actually observe in the Hive Explorer that you have at home as well, because you're giving food waste as an input, you're observing the process of consumption, and your output is your frass, your poop that you get from the Hive Explorer, which is actually fertilizer, and another output is the mealworms themselves that are growing because of the input that you put in. So, like I said, systems aren't that simple. You actually have natural systems and you also have artificial systems. And what we find is that when it comes to natural systems, they actually tend to be largely circular in fashion, whereas artificial systems, they just end up being largely more linear. And that's why it's important that we need to look at these artificial systems so that we can work together to figure out why this linear system is a problem because of perhaps running out of input, or is it that we're producing too much excess of an output, actually, such as waste? So we don't need to accept how things are. It's not that artificial systems will remain linear across time, but we need to figure out, therefore, how can we make changes to make things more circular and therefore more efficient and more sustainable. So let's recap Surabaya as a city because we've actually discussed this case before in our sixth webinar and our sixth lesson. But when I talk about larger cities and when I talk about sustainable cities, nobody thinks of Indonesia. In fact, I think many of you might not even know where Indonesia is. Funny enough, that this is my city and where I grew up. Um, Normally, I would think of cities like Tokyo or Seoul, Korea, Japan, sustainable cities, maybe even Hong Kong when I look at Asia. But what else do we think of when we think of these sustainable cities? I think we just think, oh, solar panels on the roof or green buildings, pretty modern buildings. But actually, these cities have definitely taken a lot of major steps with regard to sustainability. But today, our example might be a little bit different and less conventional. We're actually looking at Southeast Asia. So their community-driven sustainability project actually started to take place in the early 2000s. And this is fairly early considering sustainability only blew up in the past 5 to 8 years. Surabaya is actually the second densest city in Indonesia with just under 3 million residents. But in a span of 4 years, they actually decreased the amount of waste that they generated by 20%, which greatly improved their community health and it greenified their city. This was a community-led waste reduction project, and it's helped cities just like this one and Tokyo and many others around the world learn and manage their waste in a productive way. So let's see how this was achieved. So like I said, they were a strong urban city, one of the densest in Indonesia. And in 2001, they actually started to receive a big inflow of population from the countryside. So a strong urbanization, you could say. And this rapid growth and increased consumption actually led to a lot of littering, trash burning, cockroaches and rats infesting the place, and therefore an increased threat to public health. And at this time, you actually saw 2,000 tons of waste being sent to the landfill from just this one city. And well, that wasn't very good for them. So, what's the background? In 2004, actually, Surabaya, what they did was they elected new representatives for their city. So they realized like this is a problem and we're ready for a change. Now, what they did was they actually partnered with a place called Kita Kyushu City in Japan. Forgive me if I said that wrong, but they partnered with the Japanese basically and they coordinated their efforts to mobilize Surabayan citizens and their resources. So they distributed composting bins at home. They educated the public on waste separation and at-home composting techniques. So we've actually done that in one of our lessons previously, bokashi composting. I'm not sure if you were here for that lesson, but that is something that we definitely promote and talk about here at Living Farms. They also established 14 new waste composting facilities and they incentivized recycling by introducing waste banks. So citizens could actually go and sell these recyclables. And what more? Job creation took place. So in just 4 years, the waste decreased to 1,150 tons per day. And although this recycling compost could not necessarily be used for agriculture, they found that people were actually growing more plants. And this resulted in widespread greenifying of the city. All of these projects in turn created new jobs as new recycling and composting facilities were actually opened across the city along the way. And now we've discussed the Surabayan community, and this term community has come across through a lot of Living Farms lessons. You need to sit and think about what you think your community is or what you think the meaning of a community is. And I find that whether I'm talking to adults or younger kids, it's very interesting what you might, think your community is. This could be your inner circle, your family, your extended family. Is your community the people that you go to carry out your hobbies with? Like, I dance. Is my community my dance community, or is my community the literal geographical place in which I live and the people around me? Now, this actually, you might be asking, okay, why is this so important? This is important when we move on to the second part of our webinar here, or lesson 11, because when it comes to designing a future foods restaurant, one of the very important things you need to consider is the community that you're targeting. Because when it comes to the future of food and creating a sustainable restaurant and a major concept like this, you need to stop and think about what's more important to consider. Is it the um, target customers that you're trying to reach out to because of the community that you live in, or is it that you want to target your entire community as a whole? Is it the whole city? Is it the whole country? So therefore, pinpointing who you identify as a community becomes pretty important along in this process. Going back to the Surabaya case, why this case was so successful and why these big changes could take place was because of this community involvement, because the success was in big part due to the community-led nature. So the local Surabayan government, they didn't do this alone. They worked closely with the Japanese government, which I mentioned previously. They worked with private organizations, and they also worked with many small NGOs and community groups. So research suggests this was 5 to 8 to even 10 smaller community groups were involved in this partnership. And they went, therefore, to different neighborhoods. They educated locals and they taught them proper waste separation and composting. Now, lessons we learned from Surabaya. You need to identify and utilize your communities. You need to identify the main problem affecting your communities, and therefore you identify innovative solutions and get creative. So you yourself are part of your community, and therefore you yourself are part of the change. And that's something we always think about when it comes to even just the Hive Explorer. We know that you owning the Hive Explorer doesn't make you the most sustainable person on the planet. That's okay. You've taken that first step into becoming more sustainable, and you've accepted the fact that you want to learn and you want to make a positive change. And that's already more than many people are doing. So, this brings us to the actual lesson that we discuss with our students, which is very exciting. It's a sustainable restaurant pitch, right? So we tell our students, you know what? If you had to come up with a sustainable restaurant concept and you had to pitch this to your community, what are the things that you need to consider? You want it to be sustainable, but then don't forget that you want this to be viable. So, given your local conditions, what do you need to do to make sure this is actually possible, right? Like, it's got to be viable. So here we think about a few things. We ask students to identify what's the actual community that you think you want to help. You break them out down into groups and you have them think about, okay, what are the communities I'm a part of? What is my community? And this will obviously vary from individual to individual, but that's what gets them to start thinking. And then you can go as far as to say, okay, suppose I've chosen my community as the university students at the university I attended. Now, within this university community, what are the resources that I require? And like this, you get them to break down what resources they have within this community. And if these resources were finite, or if these resources were infinite, how does this change the nature of the interactions within the community? So this is where a lot of these mind maps can develop, and you can have your students actually thinking about not just, oh, I want to make a pretty restaurant with a lot of greens where I'll bring sustainable food by only using food waste. No, we want them to think about, I have identified a community. In this community, these are the problems or these are the limited resources that I have. And therefore, these are the changes that I need to make if I'm making a sustainable restaurant within this community. So you need to actually work on developing ideas and having people understand like the background and environment a little more. And then we get them to do our restaurant pitch activity. Now, this is linked to lesson 6 that we've discussed before, but essentially, students have gone ahead now and they've designed their restaurant. They've given the restaurant a name. They know what concepts they're trying to highlight in this restaurant. They want it to be colorful, eye-catching. You know, what are the different design elements going here? What's the kind of food you'll be serving, and what makes your restaurant unique? I've actually had my team come and do this exercise with me earlier, so I'm going to share some of these interesting restaurant ideas that our team came up with in just a second. And another thing is, do be respectful and supportive. Nobody's ideas need to be wrong. It's supposed to be fun and creative. And that's why we're here to help you out and think about all of these things. They are a large scale project at the end of the day, so students won't be able to pinpoint all the little details that need to go in it. But the idea is to really break down the problem and help each other be more sustainable. So here you go. Let me show you some of the things that our team looked at when I asked them to think about, what's your community? So one of our team members said, all right, my community is my rugby club, my gym members, university students. Some of them said, okay, I'm an Italian and there's only a few of us here in Hong Kong. So my community is, yep, the Italian community in Hong Kong. And what are the resources we need? All right, we need money, labor, food, clothes, shelter. Yeah. We also, as university students in a community, we need things like learning equipment. We need staff, cafeteria people, calculators, pencils. So these are just examples of how you can do this brainstorming exercise with students. And when it comes to your community requiring resources, you also have people looking at land, outdoors, indoors, grass, ventilation. Outdoor areas should be fenced, the capital, so you need money for all of this, you need funding. So you can actually have them break it down into like human capital, land, resources, and have them break down all of these different background elements before they actually go into designing their restaurants. Now, after they've done this brainstorming exercise, we've had them develop an action plan. So that's something that they do in lesson 11. The previous activity was actually already done in our 6th webinar and 6th lesson, so don't worry about it. Actually, we're supposed to look more into the action plan in this lesson, and how this is done is by actually telling your students now, okay, um, take a look again at what you did in lesson 6, where we broke down all these different community resources and all this background information. Now pick out in your community and with the resources you have, what is the major problem that you are trying to solve. So here I'm showing you an example from my team exercise, which is that we want to provide a sustainable plant-based food solution for humans and their dogs. So one of my team members, she has a dog and she finds that in Hong Kong in particular, there's not much of there's not many restaurants or cafes that's A, save plant-based food, and B, that serve it to people and their pets. So there's just a lack of space for that here, and they don't cater to this community much. So what they wanted to do was figure out what are the steps that they need to take in order to make this happen. So they said step 1, decide on the recipes and the menu. Step 2, find those suppliers. Step 3, hire and train your kitchen staff. Step 4, finalize the restaurant space, layout, and design. And step 5, actually build this customer base, right? So after you look at the community and the resources that we've talked about many times in the past 5 minutes, number 2, we're actually going to develop this action plan and have students think about, okay, how am I actually going to achieve this? And under all of this, how will I measure the success of this? And what resources do I need? So that's really important. We don't just want them figuring out, oh, what are the steps I need to take to make this restaurant happen. We need to figure out under each step, how will you measure its success? How do I know that I've done this and achieved this? And what resources do I need to make this step happen? So these are all small things that are interesting to take note of because they really surprisingly vary among groups and among different age groups. And this is also an exercise that's always great to practice, even with corporates, even with your own staff, you know, at your office when you're thinking about how to be more sustainable. I just want everybody to understand that these are all things that can be practiced with any age group and any group. In fact, even with your family, tell them, what if we needed to come up with a sustainable restaurant? What if we were opening this sustainable restaurant or business up? What are the resources that we need? What community are we focusing on? What are our main goals and how are we going to achieve these goals? And how will we measure success with all of these tiny little goals? How do we know? And here's some of the pitches actually that our team came up with. One of them was very interesting. The restaurant's called The Barn. So it's a spacious, minimalist restaurant, perhaps in an industrial building in Hong Kong. So our team said, okay, with regard to sustainability, we're not gonna go straight for like targeting the food or the necessarily the type of food we use. Maybe we're not focusing too much on the food waste concept, not that direct sustainability stuff, but why not make use of sustainable spaces? Because Hong Kong's definitely got a bit of a problem when it comes to space. We're very densely populated. So our team thought that maybe we'll target sustainability in this unique way by looking at industrial or rooftop space. We want to make it a very eye-catching, interesting design. And at the storefront, we have dogs. So that's something that's going to be very engaging and exciting for customers. And what kind of food? Sustainable plant-based food, but not just for humans, but also for dogs. And what is making this restaurant unique? Well, it's a hassle-free dining experience for dog owners, equal treatment for dog owners and other patrons. It's a healthy dining experience for the dog too, a space designed to make dining with your dog less stressful. Hmm. And what problem has this addressed? Well, it's limited dining options for dog owners, limited space for dogs in dog-friendly restaurants, because dog owners are always asked to sit outside. So it's always just a hassle dining in with your dog. So this was one of those exciting pitches that didn't target sustainability in such a direct sense, but took a little bit of an indirect approach, which is why I found it so interesting and I wanted to share it with you guys. There's one more pitch we're going to look at. So excuse me if you can't really read the small text, but I'll just walk you through it really quick. This was a restaurant called Food Waste. So waste spelled Waist. So it's actually a restaurant that would be on a university campus. And they want to show a large board up front or a television screen, which displays the statistics to encourage customers to reduce food waste and show them the impact that they make. It's going to be a sleek, simple, green restaurant with no plastic. They want to have wood and glass decor. And this stats board is actually showing you the food waste that's continuously being produced on the statistics to remind you to choose healthier options and to reduce your food waste. Because your solution is to come and eat at this restaurant. And what was interesting is that they said over here that in this restaurant, they would source vegetables and food from perhaps those farms or sources that were about to throw out some of their food because it was going bad. So they would do like a daily menu. They would cook whatever was ready to go from those farms that they were sourcing from. And it would be cheaper and healthier. It's healthy fast food. So why I found this interesting is because I think they took a little bit of a different approach. They tackled sustainability in a more direct sense. They said that we're literally going to be using food waste here, and we're not going to be looking at the background. Rather, we really want to push sustainability at the forefront. You visit this restaurant, you look around and you're like, okay, this is more sustainable. This food is actually, it would have been food waste, and it's actually telling you maybe 3,000 tons of food waste is produced every month, but no, you're eating here. So you're not contributing to that because you're eating from a restaurant that did not produce this food waste. So it actually makes you directly feel better about what you're doing, right? So in this topic, we've looked at waste management, a little bit on composting, highlighted the community quite a bit, how to make an action plan and set some goals, and the importance of resources. So that's pretty much the core of this webinar when it comes to the actual education and curriculum side of things. But now that I've got you guys here, I know that a lot of you were very excited to talk about your Hive Explorers because you've actually just received your Hive Explorers. So before I go, I'd love to hear from everybody. Do you have any questions? Either about anything that we've discussed today? Do you want to let me know about any topics that you want to hear about? Because as you know, this was our second last webinar in this series, but we're excited to make some more content from you for you and perhaps come up with a new series talking about the Hive Explorers or sustainability a little more. So if there's anything that you'd like to ask, you can go ahead and type that in the chat box. I'll be here for another 4 minutes to help you answer any of that. And if you look over here, we're also providing you with our 20% discount code. So if you are interested in getting the curriculum for your students or even just to teach your family at home or learn a little more independently, please do feel free to go ahead and check that out. Our curriculum comes with 12 lessons that talk about sustainability at the forefront. We talk about composting, microgreens, fertilization, communities, and the kind of changes that you can make in your community and some case studies like today on Surabaya. And thank you very much for attending. Um, okay, no worries. Thank you for being here. We have one last webinar in 2 weeks. It's number 12, actually. So in our last webinar, we grew microgreens together. And in 2 weeks, we're going to harvest those microgreens and we're going to show you how to make some simple salads and juice with fresh ingredients while talking about how to use the Hive Explorer to care for your mealworms. And of course, if any more questions pop up, you guys are always feel free to just email us on contact@livinfarms, and you can always check out the website and our social media pages. But again, thank you for being here. I'm going to end the session now. And I hope you have a nice day, evening, morning, or afternoon, and see you guys next time.